Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I have Jeff and Lauren Lowe from the Netflix special Tiger King here with me. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on.
Thanks for having
You're
us.
very welcome.
Definitely. So I definitely want to talk more about your lives before Tiger King, because I'm sure there's tons of stories and tons of fascinating things that happened in both of your lives before you got dragged into all this mess with Joe and all of his cronies. So I definitely want to touch on that stuff, like pretty much from the beginning.
You want to go to the beginning. This is the person to talk to.
I was
For sure.
8 pounds, 6 ounces.
Yeah, so Jeff, so when you were a kid, did you grow up in the circus world or with wild animals? When were they introduced into your life?
You know, there was absolutely a component of that in my family. That by the time I was born, my parents tried to raise me as a normal child. You know, nobody thought it was cool, like we think it's cool to have your kids brought up with monkeys and tigers and things like that, which is what Sarah's gotten to enjoy. But you know, there was certainly times that I was introduced and involved with that element of the circus. You know, I wasn't in boxcars traveling the world like most people see of old circuses, but you know, my grandfather was very heavily involved, and my mother was involved, and it
Your mother was
she
an aerialist.
she took a break. You know, when she became pregnant with me, she was actually student teaching in West Virginia, and met my father in West Virginia. And when they moved back to Lansing, they always let me know who I was. I mean, far back as I can remember, but I wasn't traveling the world in carts, you know, in boxcars. So it wasn't until probably, you know, gosh, we lived in Lansing, Michigan. We moved to DeWitt, Michigan, which was more rural, and I was kind of a loner kid. You know, I had one younger brother who was 7 years younger, so we never really connected on any real social level, other than living in the same house. But I was heavily into racing motorcycles, and that led to the involvement with the Knievel family. Every time that I've kind of, I don't want to say idolized, but you know, as a kid, we all had our idols, and Evel Knievel in the '70s was probably one of the biggest idols to a lot of young boys. There's I went to one of Evel Knievel's jumps in the Toronto Exhibition Center in Toronto, Canada, and there's pictures floating around the internet where I'm standing next to Evel, as he's getting ready to go get on his bike, and Robbie, who I had not met yet, was standing behind me. And you know, it's ironic that some 25 years later, I guess, I I ran across those two again in Daytona, and it kind of started a relationship where Evel had retired basically in 1980, 81. I think he did his last jump in Sunrise, Florida. But Robbie was, you know, still getting into, or just trying to escape his father's shadow. Evel would never let him jump very far. I think part of it was because he was concerned about his safety, but more of it was concerned that Robbie Knievel would outshine Evel's accomplishments. So, you know, we kind of forged that friendship then, and years later, I got a call from Evel, concerned about Robbie's future and potential, and wanting somebody that you know had that background in entertainment, which the circus kind of gave me, to help kind of steer Robbie in the right direction. And so we met in Myrtle Beach, at a bar, and we set out to make Robbie Knievel famous. we did a really good job of it. You know, I was involved in a lot of Robbie's biggest shows. I booked it. Robbie lived in my front yard in a motorhome, you know, for years. So, you know, it's there's some bittersweet memories. We traveled all over the place together, and it was fun. You know, some of those stories are gonna have to be told someday, but it's you know, the chairs that would be lined up outside Evil Knievel's hotel rooms by staff. So guys at Bike Week in Sturgis, there'd be chairs outside of Evil's room so guys could bring their girlfriends and line them up to go in and do their thing with Evil Knievel, just so these guys could say that Evil Knievel was on top of my wife for a while. You know, it's crazy. It was
That's like Elvis level there.
You know, Elvis was kind of like
You
mentioned Elvis. I was friends with Elvis's bodyguards. Elvis was another big hero of mine, and I was too young to ever have met Elvis. I saw him when I was 11 years old in Pontiac, Michigan, but I was never old enough to meet him on any kind of intellectual level. But I did befriend the bodyguards after Elvis died because I wanted to buy whatever they had collected over the years. And it ends up that, you know, his bodyguards were kind of lost souls after Elvis died. And two of them spent the night at my house, several nights, because they just had no place to go. You know, once they were done living at Grayson, these guys didn't know how to make long distance phone calls. It was so crazy, the small bubble that they lived in and the existence. They were there just to take care of Elvis, and they never learned these fundamental chores of going to the bank and making a long distance phone call. So I purchased a lot of memorabilia from those guys, and let them crash on my couch for a while. And the next interesting phase of my life was I forged a relationship with Prince, entertainer Prince. I saw one night I was searching eBay, and I saw someone had Prince clothing for sale. And you know, most people would have discounted it because it was on a female mannequin and had boobs, and it just didn't look like Prince clothes. But I could tell, I knew, because I was such a big fan, I knew that it was real. And this person had several items for sale at the time. They had just posted them. Opening bid was $500 or $600. So I sent an email and I said, "Where did this come from? And how much do you have?" And almost immediately I got a reply that they had 30 or 40 stage costumes with boots, jewelry, sunglasses. So I struck a deal. They wouldn't tell me who it was selling it, but I struck a deal to purchase it all cash the very next morning. So luckily I had cash in a safe in the house. And I went to Savannah Airport and at midnight, and I flew to LAX on red eye. And I ended up meeting these crazy looking people in the back of a Bronco in baggage claim at LAX. And in the back seat was Prince's ex-wife, Mayte Garcia. So it was, you know, after Prince and Mayte divorced, Prince left a lot of personal belongings in a house in Maribela, Spain, that she was putting up for sale. So that started a mess for me, because I came home, took pictures of it, and I matched pictures of Prince wearing all this stuff. And just for the hell of it, I put it up online for sale, just to see just to reinforce the fact that I hadn't overpaid for this stuff. I wanted to see what kind of offer I could get. And within 2 days, I had an offer from Hard Rock, the Hard Rock restaurant chain, to purchase it for, I think at the time, it was almost $300,000. And that was about 240,000 more than I paid for it. So I'll sell it for that much. I was going to keep it, and And I said, but for that kind of a profit, I would sell it. They sent me a deposit, and they said within so many days they would have somebody there to authenticate it. And 2 days later, at 7 in the morning, I get a knock on the door, and it was the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department, and the sheriff was there to serve me with a warrant. I mean, with a lawsuit. Those are in Las Vegas. With a lawsuit because Prince was now suing me in federal court for trademark violation. Because when I put this stuff up for sale, I used the Prince. He had changed his name at that point. We weren't supposed to call him Prince. He was now the symbol. So I ended up in federal court with Prince and his attorneys. He basically wanted to stop the sale, not because he said that Mayte had stolen this stuff, but because he was very self-conscious about his size. And he didn't want, these kids looking clothes and boots stuck on public display at the Hard Rock cafes. So ultimately, I'll try to keep it shorter. Ultimately, I beat Prince. I mean, his suit really had no merit. And in federal court, you have a level that you have to reach to keep the suit active. So I got called out into the hallway, and we discussed it because Prince did not want this stuff out. And I ended up selling a lot of the stuff back to Prince. The stuff that I put online for sale, which was not the entire collection, but the stuff that I had advertised for sale, I sold back to Prince. And in exchange, Prince would fly my family to Minneapolis and put us up in a hotel and provide us limo service to his concert in the Target Center. And then that night we were to go to the after party at the First Avenue Club in Minneapolis. Well, Prince canceled First Avenue and took the party back to Paisley Park, which was his residence and his recording studio. And we attended a concert there at Paisley Park. Well, shortly after that federal lawsuit, I get a phone call from a guy named Paul Podlisky, who we later found out was the former manager of Prince's nightclubs. Prince had these clubs in Chicago and LA, Minneapolis, in Miami called Glam. Called Glam Slam. And in each one of these clubs, Paul managed all of these clubs. And in each one of these clubs, Prince had a hell of a back room full of clothing. So once Paul had seen the press that I was buying this stuff from Mayte, he contacted me because they were closing Glam Slam down. And I ended up buying trunks, these big rolling trunks, wardrobe trunks with Prince's logos on them. And I bought several hundred costumes and boots and all kinds of stuff. So, it was a relationship that ended up being one of keeping Prince's stuff kind of gathered in one location instead of letting it get out to all of these auction houses. I sold a lot of stuff through Julian's auctions and these it's only rock and roll auction type things. So there's a lot of it now that's been distributed to some of these places, but for as long as I could, I kept it, out of the public eye. But so now we still have quite a bit of stuff, and I get offers all the time from these auction companies to sell it, and I'll eventually sell it, but every once in a while we sell a piece off. But
well, I was going to say, if I had any significant amount of money, I would try to buy some, not for me per se, but for my mom, because the two men in her life, that she never met, but her two celebrity crushes, Elvis Presley and Prince.
You know what? There's just
something concert was a Prince concert in the 80s, and she's never gotten over it. I've gotten her, tons of magazines, CDs, all kinds of stuff. It just doesn't quite do it for her. So, I mean, that's like I said, if I ever make it rich, I'm going to be hitting you up for some of that Prince stuff for her. And
There's
I
something
would be
about,
son of the year. That would just make her whole life. So
something about those two guys that just, made them so much different than most of us mortals, and
They had style, like, they
yeah,
had style, like,
they both had talent, immense
Mhm.
talents. They were both pretty. They were both, just so unique. And they broke that cookie cutter mold of all the boy bands. So
that's true.
kudos to your mom.
well, she was born in '69, so that was her first concert. I believe it was '84. And she's got this huge Elvis poster that belongs in a store somewhere, but it's in her bathroom. So every time you go in the bathroom, it's like Elvis is watching you do your business. It's kind of weird.
That's kind of weird.
So, but no, I mean, that's how, and so many people have said, I want to buy that from you. No, I can't part with Elvis. Like it's funny. My dad, he hates it. He's like, please, someone take it away. Like,
Her mom is the same way. She got all the stuff all over her house, and her dad just doesn't get it. So.
My mom has all the records, all the VHS things, like every single thing. It's yeah.
Good
I
taste.
And then I kind of retired. I retired young. I haven't worked for anybody since I was 18 years old. I always came up with my own side hustles to support a family. I got into insurance salvage, where if your house burned down, but half of your furniture survived and your televisions and all these things survived the fire, I would buy those items from the insurance company, because the insurance company ultimately would replace your furniture because it smelled like smoke or whatever. So I set up a small warehouse in St. John's, Michigan, and I started buying from Allstate and State Farm insurance companies. And that led me to a $50,000 purchase of televisions out of a warehouse in Chicago. And when I got to that warehouse in Chicago, it's millions of vacuum cleaners and millions of computers, and it's just, I said, okay, this is a pretty cool business, because there's all the iPhones that everybody can't find. There's all the iPads. There's all the Dyson vacuums. All these things that everybody was clamoring to get. There's thousands of them in these warehouses that had been returned to Best Buy or Circuit City, or Target, not Target, Tiger Direct, or Sky Mall magazine had all the, it was just, people just don't realize how much stuff is purchased every day in the United States, and then how much of that gets returned. So I was the guy who now was buying my load of all this merchandise that had been purchased and returned or discontinued, or a lot of times if a baby seat gets recalled by Greycoat, for instance, all these baby seats get pulled out of in Kohl's. Well, they don't usually get destroyed. They usually get sold into the secondary liquidation market, and hopefully, they, in their eyes, they justify that they're probably going to Mexico, or the standards aren't as high as in the United States. So I was just buried, in liquidation stuff, and I was buying probably 10 semi-loads a week just from Walmart, and I'd get a semi-load in from a designer in New York City, Bergdorf Goodman's. They would be full of, at the time, Coach handbags and Burberry handbags and Brahmins and all of these, expensive,
I like those loads. Those are nice loads.
Chanel. I didn't get any Louis Vuitton, but you'd get loads from Costco, and you think you've seen everything in Costco store. You haven't, because there'll be a 3-carat diamond come in, and then there'll be a coffin. We got coffins.
Whoa.
We got from Amazon. We got pallets full of dildos and butt plugs and all these sex toys. That they were not customer returns,
Obviously.
but they were like Christmas packaging. So in January, all the dildos that had Christmas wreaths, packaging, they get liquidated because
dildos,
because the following Christmas it would be something, there'd be a different toy.
Like Dick in the Box shit, essentially.
Yeah, there's all kinds of weird stuff. So I got rather wealthy from that stuff, and to the point where our accountant was like, dude, you got to start. You got to start buying stuff, you know. Otherwise, you're going to be buried in tax debt. So, that's what started me buying all the exotic cars and boats and things, and we'd use them as a tax write-off because, you know, if you put your logo on the side of a Ferrari, all of a sudden your Ferrari becomes a billboard for your business, and it's a justifiable tax write-off. So, you know, have I been? My life was so much more interesting before Tiger King, and it was actually in a big huge house in Colorado Springs where Joe heard of this guy, me, that was going out there to buy a zoo from just a small zoo, kind of like Joe's was, even smaller than what Joe's was.
But we already had animals.
But I already had animals. We had 20 big cats of our own at that time, I guess. And I went out there to buy this zoo, this great big huge mansion was right down the street from it. So it was an ideal situation. And then Joe sends a message that he wants to come out and check out this zoo to see if it, just to help me out, you know.
You know, I want to come out and see if, and just see if it'll get USDA inspected. You know, I can help walk you through all this.
So I said, you know what, this guy's been in it for a long time. I hadn't been that familiar with the USDA because I was always just a private owner. I never owned a zoo per se. So I flew Joe and Travis out to Colorado Springs twice, and when Joe saw, you know, the life we were living, I think he just figured he'd found a sugar daddy, and that visit turned into more of a request to come run his zoo because he claimed he was dying of HIV. He told us at the steakhouse he was HIV positive, and he showed pictures, you know, of all kinds of horrible contraptions coming in and out of him in a hospital bed. Come to find out later that was from a staph infection from a facelift gone bad. But he told us I was 2 hours from death, and he wanted me to come run his zoo. So
that's where just shit hit the fan.
That's when I said, Lauren, I said, look, this hillbilly in Oklahoma, in the middle of no place, you know, Colorado Springs is isolated enough, but Wynnewood, Oklahoma was like moving into the desert in Egypt. And there's just nothing there. You know,
you gotta worry about tornadoes out there more than anything.
You're an hour.
Kudos to you, Lauren, for going along with this, because if someone had said, hey, I got this beautiful life in Colorado, let's go to Oklahoma with this weird guy, I'd have been like, you go ahead, I'll maintain the house here, you have fun with that.
See, here's the thing is that it's always, my animals have always been my passion. So when he and I started getting big cats together, I loved it. It was exciting. So when Joe came in, he said he was dying. My animals need help. Yes, his animals definitely needed help. Like water wasn't being paid, electricity, food for the animals. Like he was so far behind, and we were like, we need to go in here. We need to expand the enclosures. We need to get everything up to date. These animals need to be fed, or else that crazy woman in Florida was going to come in and take it all. So we have to go there. So it was specifically for the animals. It was not for Joe one bit. I don't give two shits about Joe.
Yeah, we flew into Oklahoma City and rented a car, went down to the park, and like she said, utilities were about to be shut off. He had a $5,000 water bill. You know, the park had several $5,000 water bills because it was so old, and the plumbing system that was under the ground was all plastic and trees had grown up and bamboo. So there were leaks everywhere. And we went in, and I brought in a well driller to try to dig a well. So it's just pay $3,000 one time to have a well dug, and you have free water. You don't have to pay a $5,000 water bill. And we dug down over 200 feet and couldn't find water. So we had to stick with the water utility. But I paid up all the past bills. I paid, I don't know, $35,000 or $40,000 in attorney bills that because his attorneys were about to cut him off, and they were defending him in a lawsuit against Carol. And if his attorneys cut him off, then he's screwed, you know, because now Carol can just walk in and basically grabbed the keys from him because he couldn't defend himself. So I wasn't going to let that happen, or I was at least going to delay it, as long as possible. So I came in and got everything squared away,
I think
and
we spent almost in 1 month, $60,000.
the first month was about 60 grand. And then we just, living with Joe, you can imagine, you guys watch Tiger King. There's just nonstop chaos and drama and just bullshit. And we weren't used to that. We were living out in the middle of, the jungle in the jungle, out in the middle of the woods in Colorado Springs. And we
I'd love
weren't
to
used.
see that house. It sounds like an awesome place. Do you still have it?
No, I didn't own it. And then, everybody says, yeah, he was only renting the house. Yeah, I was only renting a $10,000 a month house. But
It was fun to play hide and seek in that
Yeah,
house.
it's a
There's
huge
so
house.
many places.
it was built by the guy that owned Chevron Oil, and he was 82 years old when he built it for his 26-year-old girlfriend or wife. And he died, and his family kicked her out of the house and put it up for sale. Well, this Asian businessman who was doing very well in Denver came down and bought the house for 10 grand a month, and had a big, massive 60,000 gallon swimming pool inside of it. It was 8 or 9 bedrooms and huge house, 13 or 14,000 square feet on 300 acres. So,
Oh, it is beautiful.
yeah, so I leased that for a year, and we prepaid a year's rent. And went to buy the zoo down the street, and that's when the whole Joe thing happened. So we actually walked away from that house after the rent had been paid,
4 months of only being there.
Yeah,
Wasn't
just to
4
help
months
Joe.
we decided to walk
And
away. And we had already prepaid for a year.
and there's not been, well, they rented it briefly after I left, but
Yeah.
the owner of the house, he keeps, every once in a while I get a text or a call, and he wants me to come back and take the house back. But
Because we took very good care of it.
because
Well,
when I went in there, the swimming pool was busted, all the equipment, the filters, and I went in and I paid 10 grand to put new filters in. I just did things as though it was my house, because wherever I live, I have to have things perfect. And he saw that I was, it was $5,000 a month in lawn maintenance. This place was like central. It was crazy, but we kept it up like we would our own house, and he was impressed. So, these people who try to turn us into these scamming scumbags, they're just full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. We've done nothing. Day one, we have done nothing but help people, whether it was in Las Vegas, and the whole Las Vegas with the warrants. I was USDA licensed. I could have tigers any state I wanted to have tigers. I was federally licensed to do so. Now, cities can prohibit, even if you're federally licensed, cities can prohibit exotic animals inside city limits. So when we went out, we got sick of Joe, and we just had to get away from the park. So we went out to Las Vegas and found a house that we liked. And I didn't want PETA knowing, because they've always got a way of PETA always had a way of tracking down people. And we wanted a place where if photos were taken, PETA couldn't recognize where the photos were. And we actually had James Garrettson use an alias name to lease the house. We paid all the money up front and everything, but we didn't even want our name on the rental agreement, because we figured that PETA could track it down through rental agencies somehow. Because there's animal rights nuts that work in every business. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, now, was Tiger King
And
the first show? I'm sorry, was Tiger King the first show that you ever had, or did you have a show with your previous business before you went in to help Joe?
I had a show that was picked up by the History Channel called Low Country Liquidator, and they had filmed. We had a deal for 13 episodes first season plus a pilot, and they came in and they filmed the pilot and 3 the first 3 episodes, and it was supposed to air in September of whatever year that was. I think 14 maybe. 13 or 14.
Because that's when we started.
Yeah, and actors, they were it was crazy, the filming, the production of this. And it was supposed to air in September. We get a phone call the prior August from History saying, look, she says, we have some good news and some bad news. The good news is we're going to use the show, but the bad news is we're not going to use it right now. We're going to shelf it. And because History Channel had just rehired the original head of programming, and I can't remember her name at this point, to take the History Channel back to its original roots and make it less of a transactional,
Because there was like Pawn Stars
because
and
that
Chipping Wars.
Pawn Stars and Chipping Wars and all these shows that were having high ratings were all about money. And History Channel said, look, we're not a game show channel. That she wanted to take it back to its roots of, you know, of historical, military, and scientific programming. So it kind of screwed us, because it would have been better had they just released us from the contract, because shelving it puts it out of the reach of any other network. And it was, I've got copies of it. It was a really cool show, and I think it would have done really well, but it never got to see the light of day because of
Well, would you be able to post this on YouTube? Because I'd love to see the show, or, you know, I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
I can figure out something. I'll put it in a Dropbox or something, send you a link.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to see it.
We had, it was cool because what the premise of it is, I would go buy 15 semi-loads full of liquidated material, would come into my warehouse. We would have 1,000 auction goers in our building, and as we unloaded these trucks, people would bid on the pallets, and they had selected like 10 guys, 10 people, male and female, that were going to go, and they were going to take the pallets that they bought outside, because we had a 400 spot flea market right across from the Marine Corps Air Station in Beaufort, South Carolina. Beautiful, the most beautiful flea market you've ever seen. And they were going to, it was just, these guys now had to compete to see who could make the most off of the pallet or the pallets of stuff that they bought at the prior night's auction. And we had some real characters in it that were pretty funny. And from an 80-year-old man to a man, Pete. And I ain't no brain scientist or nothing, but yeah.
It was funny.
Yeah, you'll get a kick out of it. And you can tell it would have been a really popular show. And it was less about me and more about them.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like in Deal or No Deal, you know, you got the banker. I was kind of the banker that you didn't see that often, but you knew that the banker knew everything that was going on.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, with your background, I mean, you're the star of any show you're going to do. So it doesn't matter if it's about you or not. It's going to circle around and still be about you because you're the star. I mean, obviously, you make shit happen. So
good and bad sometimes. So anyway, that we left South Carolina, you know, down in the dumps, and goddamn, I wish that show would have taken off, because I think it really would have done well. We get out to Oakland, or we get out to Colorado Springs, and we do our thing. We get the house the way we like it, and we get, we're on the point of making that our home. And we got a call from the History Channel saying, you know what, we changed our minds. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
And I said, you might be ready to go, but I left. I said, I sold the warehouse, and they said, I'm done. So it was just a missed opportunity. And I didn't, I usually never missed out on opportunities. I always made something of it, but that was the big one in life that kind of disappointed me, that I just couldn't make it click. But, who knew that within 5 years, 160 million people would hate me and think that I stole Joe Exotic Zoo. But
I'm definitely not one of those people.
Yeah.
I remember you guys from the beginning. I was like, these are the only ones that make any remote sense in this whole circus of events. You know, I was like, so I think I'm gonna stick with them and see what they have to say. The rest of these guys, they're too weird.
we were the only ones there with all of our teeth and with all of our,
Sense.
with normal clothes. We didn't wear Wrangler jeans. Sorry, Wrangler. And we were two fish out of water. Joe said we were. What was his comment about?
What?
Joe said something about goldfish in a,
Goldfish in a barrel?
No, he was talking about how perverted we were, and
He is
like,
the most perverted motherfucker there
yeah.
is.
He claimed we were having sex with customers from the zoo. Never. I wish.
Like I was a manager of like 3 GNCs. Then I stopped that, and I became a manager at like Route 21. But I was always in some type of retail, but my passion had always been animals. And then just happened to be like one day, I was actually working at one of his stores, and I was coming back from lunch, and I was just getting out of the Jeep, and I had never like formally met or talked to him before. Well, you know what? I take that back. A couple weeks prior, I went to one of his other stores in Beaufort, and because I saw online that they were having a really big sale, like something with groceries came in, and of course I'm living by myself, so I am on a strict budget, and everything is such a good deal. So
That's when her budget days ended. It's the last budget she was ever on.
But I've always been taught to be very, conservative with your money. Yeah, frugal. Thank you, with your money. My mom loves to find good deals. So anyway, so I went to his place, and his kids are working the register, and he's kind of going down the aisle or something like that. And I kind of like, how did I bring it up to you?
She asked me.
I was like, how are things going at the other store? Because I didn't think that he knew that I worked there, and I was just, but I was like, he's cute. He's actually kind of attractive.
I don't remember that I didn't. I think you said. I just thought you were a customer asking how things were going.
Asking how things were going, because I was like, he's cute.
But then when you said I worked there.
Yeah, I said, oh yeah, I worked there.
I pretend like I realized it.
Yeah. It was but I was doing this in front of his wife.
Yeah.
It wasn't like anything like meant to be like that. It was just me just talking, and
right.
And so let me just say though, I am on good terms with his ex-wife now, so we're good. So
that's awesome.
But I was coming back from lunch one day, and he just happened to be pulling up, and he just stopped his car right by mine, and he rolled down the window, and he's like, hey, and I was like, oh, hey, and I just like kind of walked over, and we just was a very brief talk that he just like put his hand out, and I just grabbed his hand, and it was very weird. It was like an automatic thing, and it was like, okay. He's like, well, I'll be.
You mind having a
Yeah. He's like,
I'm gonna fuck your life up.
He was like, well, I'll be inside in just a minute. And as soon as I start walking back in, I was like, what? He comes over, and he just like has a brief talk. Just so you have it too. And he's like, oh, well, you're probably wondering why I gave you my number. And I was like, I thought you were just being a good boss. So I was like, okay, yeah, that was going on. So
no clue at all.
So I started screwing the boss.
I mean,
So
hey, no judgment here. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's very memorable, but I'm on a good relationship now with his kids and his ex-wife.
Kids, man.
Huh?
Was it tough at first, like with the kids especially, or?
Yeah, it was challenging because I've been married to my first wife for 20 some odd years, and
His kids hated me.
Yeah, everybody hated you for a while.
Yeah, oh god, they did. But I think what really helped though is so it wasn't until after he and I got married. And his kids still hated me. They didn't like hate me as much, but they still didn't care for me. But
See, my kids were adults too.
they were
so-
adults, that's the thing, yeah. But it wasn't until like November of 2017. So we had already been together for 5 years prior to this. So we got married on July 4th, 2017. Hi, honey. And it wasn't until November 2017, I had texted his kids and I said, hey, I want to do something special for your dad. I was like, I'd like to fly you guys out to Las Vegas and surprise them. I was like, just don't tell them. They told Kathy, their mom, and she thought it was a brilliant idea. So I flew the kids in and I got a car to go pick them up. He had no idea this was happening because he knew that his kids hated me. There was this horrible relationship. And I have a video of this moment and it's so special, but I hid them, I didn't hide them, but I put them in the living room. Our friends were keeping Jeff distracted upstairs. They bring him down and it was just like, holy shit, you brought me my kids, you know? It was just like,
Let's go to the club.
he's like, because we hadn't seen each other in quite a while. There really hadn't been a good relationship. And that helped rekindle everything. Everybody was good. We all ended up going to the club that night. His kids were like, this is the best day of my life. It
My
was
son was
great.
into, all this EDC and EDM. We took him in. We had VIP access in Vegas because of a guy we knew. So we're sitting at the table with Steve Aoki, or the next
Yeah.
night would be Tiesto, or some of the bigger names in the electronic music business. So the kids are just like, this can't be my dad.
That's your dad.
Yeah, it was a very good special moment. And then on his birthday, so it was actually the day right after I flew them in. We're all, we had a great night before. All of a sudden we hear bang, 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 bang. Las Vegas Marshals, open up. We all end up in handcuffs on the floor. They're raiding our house on his birthday because PETA found out where we were. And they came in and they.
And you know how they found out?
Yeah,
Joe Exotic.
Joe told them.
Oh,
Joe told them we were.
Joe realized that he had no control at that zoo, and he knew he was robbing it blind, and ultimately shit was going to hit the fan. And when we ever returned, he knew his gig was up. So he was trying to get us in trouble because of USD license. However, when we rented that house, it was north of Vegas, way out off the strip, about 15 miles. We told the realtor we needed to be in Clark County, not in the city of Las Vegas. And way the hell out there in North Las Vegas, you're figuring there's no way this is city. Our house was city. The house across the street was county.
Yeah.
So we were violating city ordinance by we had 2 tigers in the house. And
Yeah, and the lemur, and they took them away from
Yeah.
us.
that's what started the whole Las Vegas shit. And I paid my fine, and nobody went to jail. I mean, they just ticketed us.
Mhm.
But I had a year to pay the tickets. It was $10,000 fine. And we wondered why they were coming down so hard on us, because it was just, who gives, it's an exotic animal. It's like somebody having a snake down on Fremont Street. Okay, you're not supposed to, but who gives? So, ultimately come to find out that Joe was driving, telling him that we were doing all these illegal things. We were taking cubs into hotels and doing all these things to try to get us in trouble with the judge out in Las Vegas, because Joe figured if he could cause us enough trouble out there, we'd drive and go away. He could take over and he could continue to embezzle from the park. And so that's why the whole Las Vegas thing happened. It wasn't because we really did anything wrong.
It was because of Joe.
Just because of Joe. So
Karma really struck Joe
Yeah.
pretty hard this time.
somebody that says we
Yeah.
were the snitch, he was the snitch first. He was trying to, once we got the park refunded and we had you know, people coming back again. We had the water bills paid, and there was food being, you know, purchased again. He tried to get rid of us.
And use it as his
Didn't work.
piggy bank.
It
Yep.
didn't work for him. So, because, you know, we owned the park at that point. We came in and we took it over in February 12th, 2016.
Mhm.
And he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand that he didn't own that property and all
He
those
never
animals.
did own it. It was always somebody else's thing, but
Yeah. So anyway, he did what he could do, and I did what I could do, and I was better at it than he was, obviously.
Well, that's just unforgivable, like him doing that. I mean, honestly, I don't know how you didn't go straight to the park and kick his ass for that, because most people would have.
there was this one day.
There's been a couple moments, you know. There was one time, I'll try to be brief, but we snuck back in. He didn't know we were coming back to Oklahoma. We snuck back in, and I went straight to the bank because Joe claimed that the park was
Running out of money, and y'all spending this money in Las Vegas.
we weren't. So I wanted to see where the money was going because I knew the attendance had been, you know, decent. And we went to the bank and we had them print out all of the bank statements that were since we were gone, because Joe changed the password and locked us out when we were in Las Vegas. I couldn't log into the bank account on a daily basis because, and he claimed it was because the IP address in Las Vegas was flagging the account, and they kept locking the account up. He says, I can't even do business because you guys logging in and then they flag the account. So, you know, we took that, we accepted that because it made sense. But when we went back there, the teller that was helping us, she goes, I got to tell you something. She goes, and I don't know if you know this or not. She says, but we had a federal order come in and to give the federal government access to this account. And I said, why would they do that? And she says, I don't know. She says, but the feds are watching your bank account for some reason. So I was like, all right, well, what the hell? We didn't do anything. We just had the account for a little over a year. So we went back to the park, and I wanted to set Joe up. Basically, I wanted to catch him stealing. So I went to the two staff that he had working the front desk, and I was going to find out what we did in cash the day before, and I was going to match it up to the cash deposit that should have gone into the bank the next day. And when I went to the counter and asked two of his employees, how did we do yesterday?
I don't know.
I don't know. She was, George handles that. So I went to, and I said, how did we do yesterday? He goes, good. I said, how much cash we do? And he goes, I'm not sure how much cash we did. You're gonna have to check with Brenda.
They were going back and forth.
So they, you know, putting it back off each other. I said, okay, not a problem. I went into the office and Joe comes in, he goes, we need to talk. And I said, yeah, we do. And he goes, you're asking about the cash. And I said, yeah, you don't think I have the right to ask about my cash? And I said, don't forget who owns this park. I said, you don't, you work for me. And
little did Joe had no idea, like we said, we had already gone back to the bank and we had stacks of papers, and we had been in the cabin for 2 days straight, going through all these checks and mishandling of funds, to where I found $110,000 money stolen.
in $50,000,
Yeah.
$46,700 in forged checks to cash.
Yeah.
He'd write a check to cash for $8,000, walk up to the teller, sign my name
In front of the teller.
on the bottom of the check, and he'd take the cash. So yeah, so we had all of this prepared, and I brought hell down on him inside that office, and he thought I was going to kill him. And those recordings, unfortunately, never made it to Tiger King, because it would have proven right from the get-go that he was stealing from me, that he claims on this recording that I've sold $200,000 worth of Tiger Cubs and I can't get any of my money back out.
Absolutely
Well, you
not.
just admitted to, $200,000 worth of felony charges for selling endangered species. He show fewer cats were born than were actually born, because we had this birth log where they recorded. So we got him to basically confess to everything the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. And I got so pissed off at one point, and he's sitting down at the desk, and I punched the file cabinet next to him and busted my hand on its hard. Exploding on Joe and accusing him of all these crimes and plotting to kill Carol and buying ghillie suits, you know, these camouflage suits. And said, you're trying to drag me. Actually, Joe versus Carol, the actor who was in Joe versus Carol, he was more accurate in the portrayal of me because he said, Joe, I'm not letting you drag me into your bullshit, which is exactly what happened. I told him, I said, I'm not going down for you, you dumbass. I said, you can break all the laws you want. I said, but you're not dragging us into it. And Tiger King didn't show that. They wanted to make us the bad guys. So, you know, you can go up and find those videos. They're still up on YouTube someplace. And had they used those, then we would not have faced all of the bullshit, negative, you know.
Yeah, I think I saw some of those actually. I went. Is it on his YouTube channel or is it a different YouTube?
It might be. You know, he might have shown. It was on our YouTube
It was
channel.
on
It was private
actually.
for a while, and it's probably been altered and modified by because that's what John Phillips likes to do. Is he likes to go in and change the composition of some to fit his narrative and fit the truth. But we're losing you, freezing you.
Dude, what'd you say?
I said I stopped following
says-
John. I stopped following John Phillips a long time ago because I don't know, he just seemed like a shady character.
He's shadier than Joe is, and the problem is he's a respected lawyer, so he says. So he gets the benefit of the doubt. You know, Joe never got the benefit of the doubt. Joe was always considered, you know, a con man. But John Phillips can pull all these scams and lies and cons and steal money from the PPP program. And while he's buying a Ferrari and a beach house, yet he gets a $400,000 PPP loan for COVID relief. You know, he's just a scumbag. And he's in Tiger King 4. There's a lot that's going to come out about him that he's not going to like. But it's, you know, it's just par for the course with these guys. There's very few in that circle. John Rinke ran and hid from the feds when they came after Joe, because Rinke knew he was the one who altered all of the birth logs. Rinke was the one who was in charge of all the cubs. Every cub that was born, it was under Rinke's command. And Rinke would keep track of which cubs were sold, which cubs were. You know, I've got the records. We found the book after we took the zoo back over, where all the births were erased. You could
They would use pencil.
Yeah, they'd use pencil. They wouldn't use pen, and it all penciled in, and then it'd be erased, changed from a 3 to a 2, and then from a 2 to a 1, and then she didn't have any cubs. So Rinke knew that he was complicit in 14 years worth of ESA violations with Joe. So Rinke took off, and he was a ghost. He didn't post on social media. He was a ghost. He didn't answer his cell phone. And the feds came to me and they said, "What do you think about Rinke?" And I said, "I think Rinke will talk to you." And he refused. So now Rinke's out there supporting Joe. Of course, he supports him after all the investigation's done, and you know, but he's just as big a crook and scumbag as Joe is, and he should be sitting in there with Joe. You know, if Joe was in there and Rinke knew from day one. Rinke probably heard Joe threaten Carol's life more than anybody else in the country. You know, because he lived in his house. He lived in his parking lot of his house. You know, for years and years and years. When Joe bought the ghillie suits, Rinke was the one who knew what they were for, and you know, the assault rifle that Joe named his Carol gun. You know, Rinke was more entangled in Joe's plot to kill Carol Baskin than anybody else was. And James and I, the two that kind of we we didn't manipulate anything. We just let Joe be Joe. And while we were letting Joe be Joe, we recorded it. And so, but that's how they claim we set him up now, is because we recorded it. And, you know, the feds would say, you know, can you get him to confess to this? So then they'll say they were fabricating, they were manipulating, they were trying to force him to say things. No, we would drop a hint. Like, I'd say, Joe, Alan Glover wants to come back. And I said, but he's afraid that if he comes back, you're going to want the $3,000 that you gave him back. The Fed, you know, just tell him he can pay me off, you know, in small, whatever. And Joe knew, at that point, Joe knew he was being,
Something wasn't right.
something wasn't right. And he tried to avoid the question. And I said, what do you want me to tell him, Joe? He wants to come back and work. I said, where'd you get the $3,000 anyway? He wouldn't have answered. He stood there next. So, you know, Joe knew at that. I want out of this. Can you help me? He says, "Can you help me rehome all my animals?" And he thought I was stupid enough. I was going to let him take all those animals out of there. Lauren and I went to a movie in Norman one night, which was about an hour north. Joe thought we went to Norman to eat, so we got halfway there or something. We just said, it's too far. I don't want to go. You know, let's just go back home. So we turned around. We went back to the park, which he didn't expect. And when we pulled in there were cars and people, and it was after hours. We said, what the hell's going on here? So we walked out there, and John Finley's coming around on a tractor with a trailer with dead tigers in the back. And Joe had his vet there with her tackle box full of drugs out, and had all of these syringes loaded up with euthanasia medicine. And the guy that buys the skeletons from Joe, who buys the dead tigers, was there. And Ricky was there. And when we walked out and Joe saw us,
His whole, he was just like,
he was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I said, what's going on? He goes, I said, what's going on? He goes, Jeff, he goes, I'm just trying to lighten your load. And I said, if you put another needle in another tiger, the next needle goes in your neck. And I said,
I'm like yelling, calling him an asshole, fuck you.
They had a list of 28 cats that they were going to kill that night while we were at the movie theater, including Bone Digger, you know, the one that Rinky claims is his boy. He was in exchange for turning over all those dead tigers to Skulls Unlimited, which was the guy there to buy them. They would pay to have Bone Digger stuffed, like taxidermy, so Rinky could put him in his living room. But
we gave Bone Digger 2 more years to live.
yeah, we when we got there, they had killed 2. Ledoux was a white one.
Safari and Ledoux.
Safari and Ledoux were dead, and they had needles loaded up for
Penn and Teller.
For Penn and Teller, and John Finley took Ledoux home, cut his head off, and soaked in and put the head in a bucket full of bleach so he could have a skull. It's just a bunch of sick bastards.
So where's Pito when all this is going on? Why are they coming after you guys when these are clear crooks?
You know, PETA is the most hypocritical bunch of twat waffles that's ever walked the earth. They've killed more animals. You know, they'll steal animals. They go and take all these animals in, claiming to be putting them in shelters, but they gas them. I mean, there's all kinds of videos. Penn and Teller, the actual comedians Penn and Teller, did a really good documentary on PETA because PETA went after Penn and Teller for using animals in their magic act in Las Vegas. So Penn and Teller says, well, we know what you're really about. We're going to expose you. PETA's just a terrible organization.
Ringling, they gave Ringling a lot of hell before they closed down. And, you know, I don't know if it was you or it was somebody that I knew. Well, no, it was a clown that I met recently that knew someone had toured on Ringling. And she said that by the time they had shut down, that Ringling they were taking the best care of the animals that they ever had before when they shut down, and that everybody was just so
Yeah.
heartbroken when they shut the show down. So
Well, you know, Feld Entertainment bought Ringling back years after in association with me. And I know that PETA went on them immediately because they're using bull hooks on elephants. And just like Doc Animal used bull hooks on everybody in the circus and the carnival industry that had elephants, that's the only way you can handle an elephant safely, because it's the only thing to get their attention. It's a nail and a hook, and they would hook him behind the back of the leg. It'd be like somebody poking you with a thumbtack, though, because you know their hide is like leather mixed with steel, mixed with Kevlar, and then carbon fiber.
Yeah.
They're really tough skin, but still, not that makes it right. It doesn't make it right to chain an elephant on a 4-foot chain to the ground. It's not right. And so while I was torn that the circus was losing all of the animals, I understood why. I mean, you know, as we evolve as humans and we become more compassionate, I see PETA's point about you can't do that with elements. You can't do that with things that have complex thought ability. Tigers don't have complex thought. Elephants did. So, you know, I see the argument both sides, but the way that PETA did it and the fact that they used donated money, they begged and begged for donations. They get $64 million a year donated. And then they use that to put legitimate people like us out of business. You know, I don't think that, if anything, let them pay taxes on that money if they're going to use it, because we were tax-paying citizens paying, you know, taxes on a zoo that was making millions of dollars a year. Now they come in, they don't pay taxes, and they take away our tax base from the the public. So how does that make any sense? And when Tiger King came and filmed at the new park that we had in Thackerville, the guy Eric Good, God damn, Jeff, you know, we were building these monster cages. He says, if PETA could come here and see what you're doing, he says, I think it would take all the heat off of you. And I said, no, it wouldn't. I said, because we're associated with Joe Exotic. And Joe Exotic for so many years was after Carol Baskin. Carol Baskin's in bed with PETA. Carol Baskin would pay $50,000 a year, you know, donations to PETA to leave her alone. So it's just an incestuous, corrupt system, and just like anything else is. And so I said, you know, if we're gonna be in a corrupt society, let's go to Mexico, where at least we know who the enemies are, we know who has their hand out, and we don't have to be blindsided or stabbed in the back by people that we thought we could trust. So you come down here, you know who you got to pay, you know, and you don't go through the bullshit with USDA. You have one inspector who he makes a determination whether you're treating your animals right or not. Because we pointed out the federal government has a conviction rate of 97 or 98% on all the cases that they bring against people that they charge. Well, they charge and transferring animals without permits. Well, you also notice that after the Tiger King hype died down, they dropped all charges. They came and that does not happen in the federal court. You know, when the DOJ brings charges against you, you're done. Ask Joe Exotic. And they completely dropped everything. They dismissed it against us. And they didn't assess us the $300,000 fine for the raid that they conducted on our property. So just the fact that they dismissed all the beginning, they had no merit. Those charges should have never been brought, and it was all instigated by Carol Baskin.
So I'm assuming all of this will come out in the fourth part of Tiger King.
It will, and so much more.
Well, I can't wait to see it. I can't.
Yeah,
I'm looking
there's been more amazing things will be revealed in the first one than were ever in the second. I mean, in the first, and we know that it won't have nearly the thump that the first one had, because you know that was a magical time with COVID and lockdown, and
everything just happened to work.
The stars aligned for Eric Good and Netflix, and that won't happen this time. People are going to think it's just going to be a hollow shell of Tiger King, but there's going to be a lot of stuff comes out that's I think will surprise a lot of people, and it will destroy a lot of the myths about us. So
Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to it, and I really thank you guys for your time today.
not a problem.
Before I let you go, I want to know, in your opinion, I just want to hear like what do you guys think is the craziest story from all of this, all of your your whole experience with everything? Could be from Elvis's bodyguards, could be from Vegas nights, anything. What is in your mind craziest story that you've ever been a part of? I'm just curious.
You should give me a few days to think about this. You know,
I don't know, there's been so many wild things that have happened. I mean, and it doesn't seem to, I mean, it's cooled down quite a bit, thank God. But
Something that we've never heard before.
you know, when I went to James, most people are going to be interested more in the Tiger King end of it and kind of behind the scenes. When I went to James initially, it wasn't to get anybody in trouble. It was because James had a history with Carol Baskin, and James and I had kind of bonded because of our hatred, our common hatred towards what Joe was doing to the animals. And when Joe killed those 5 tigers, James and I, we became real close because we both, this is inexcusable. This has to end. We have to end it. So we called and we told James to meet us at Applebee's in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And we just said, what can we do? I said, you know what? I said, Carol Baskin has spent $2 million trying to get Joe put out of business. I said, call Carol Baskin and tell her I'll sell this park to her for $500,000 in cash. And along with that comes all the computers that will show the bankruptcy frauds that she was alleging Joe committed. I said, I'll hand her Joe on a silver platter, and she can do with him what she wants. So so we go out to a park bench, and James calls Carol's number and gets the voicemail, and he just hangs up. So he says, I'll try her again later. And the next day, James is in his store in Ardmore, and federal fish and wildlife agents show up and ask him, why did you call Carol Baskin and hang up? And he's like, what? Because I offered James, I told him, I said, if you can sell this place to Carol, I'll give you $100,000. It's a commission against the sale. And I said, Lauren and I will go back to Colorado, back to the house. And the fact that it was already so in bed with Carol Baskin that a hang-up phone call to her cell phone prompted them to send agents from Texas to James to find out why he would call her and hang up as opposed to leave a message.
so they were already all in bed with each other.
So we knew at that point. James called me up and he says, you're never going to believe who just came in my store. And I said, I thought he was going to say some celebrity. And I said, who? And he goes, federal agents came in and they're watching Joe. And I said, well, that fits with what the bank told us, because the bank was watching our bank account to see where all the money Joe was, selling tiger cubs all over the planet from. So, people probably would be shocked to know that this thing was already in the incubator when Lauren and I came along. We had nothing to do with reporting him to the feds.
We
The
actually
feds,
reported him to our lawyer. We never spoke to the feds, and then our lawyer is who contacted.
and we think we went to our attorney in Edmond, Oklahoma, and when we found Joe was plotting to kill Carol. He was robbing from the zoo. He lied about preparing the taxes for the park.
That's when they said.
So, and I said, what do? I said, I'm reporting it to my attorney to get advice to protect myself. And when they found out that a human was being threatened, they had the legal obligation to intervene. And they went to another big attorney in Oklahoma City who said, you got to go to the feds. So we don't know if that's what initiated the feds going to Carol Baskin and saying your life is in danger. But
Yeah, Yeah, we protected ourselves from the.
Yeah. So we were protected. We knew, everybody says we plotted. We knew everything from day one. And then, when James would talk to the feds, because he was actually their confidential informant, he was wired every time he went to talk to Joe. But he would come in, James was keeping us abreast almost on a weekly basis, if not every other day. He was calling us in Vegas, telling us, stay out there, don't come back. So, we both knew what was happening as it happened, but it wasn't until Lauren and I went back to the park that I told James, I said, I actually want to meet with the feds now. I said, I don't want to be this faceless person that's just relaying messages. I said, I want them to come interview me so they can look me in the eye. And when the feds came to our cabin June 5th, and he said, tell me your story. We told him the story, and he says, you know what? He says, I believe every word you told me. He says, you know why I believe every word you told me? He says, because they match, haven't done anything wrong. I said, this guy Robin is blind and he's plotting to kill somebody. So that's probably the biggest event that happened to us. Meeting celebrities and it's really cool. It's really cool and it's fun, but life-changing events, that's probably, you guys wouldn't know who we were if that meeting at Applebee's had not taken place. And I think the feds would have just come in, raided it, probably arrested me because I owned the bank account where Joe was funneling tub sale money into. And, it would have been a completely different situation. So that's probably the most significant event that happened throughout the entire, and it earned us the trust of the federal government because we gave our statements, and our statements never changed to this date. I can verbatim, I can tell you exactly the chain of what happened, and we haven't wavered from those facts at all. And even Joe's lawyer, I've got a text message from him. He says, "Man," he says, "for somebody who's supposed to be a liar," he says, "you sure tell the same story over and over and over." He says, "You guys are either the best actors on earth, or you're telling the truth." And I said, "We're telling the truth. We have nothing to lie about." So I think that
I would believe that because
the
I pretty much memorized the story now from hearing it on every single interview I've heard, and even on this same story. So I can confirm that as well. It's nothing changed at all.
It's easy to repeat the truth.
Yeah.
It's when you start telling lies that you gotta remember what your lies were. And fortunately, we told the truth from day one. Now, dates and phone calls, they get confused because hell, I had a stroke 4 or 5 years ago, and I lost a lot of the cognitive ability to remember things. But for the most part, I can give you 90% of the story to the day and how it unfolded. And then we learned more. After Joe gets arrested, and the feds have to turn over everything to John Phillips, all the evidence in the trial that they collected. We learned things that we didn't know. We didn't know that the feds were actually working against us when we were in Las Vegas. At the same time, they were working with us. They were trying to get us in trouble with the judge out there. And just like, are you fucking kidding me? We're helping you, and you're trying to.
If they would try coming back and say, "Hey, that ain't happening."
That's the only reason. One of the only reasons that we went to John Phillips and offered Joe any assistance at all is because we felt so betrayed by the Department of Justice and Federal Fish and Wildlife.
Well, guys, I'm sorry to cut you off. The clock is ticking down again, but I thank you so much for this. There's so much more we could talk about, and I hope we can again soon. But I really appreciate this.
Not a problem. We appreciate it.
And I look forward to Tiger King 4.
Yeah, we'll keep you
It's
updated.
coming. Everybody says there was not a 3, there was a 3. Netflix calls it Tiger King 3. So it's Tiger King 4.
Sounds good to me. All right, you guys take care.
Thank
Thanks so much.